Rugby union, or simply rugby, is a contact team sport which originated in England in the first half of the 19th century. One of the two codes of rugby football, it is based on running with the ball in hand. In its most common form, a game is between two teams of 15 players using an oval-shaped ball on a rectangular field with H-shaped goalposts on each try-line. In 1845, the first football laws were written by Rugby School pupils. Other significant events in the early development of rugby include the Blackheath Club's decision to leave the Football Association in 1863 and the split between rugby union and rugby league in 1895. Historically an amateur sport, in 1995 restrictions on payments to players were removed, making the game openly professional at the highest level for the first time. World Rugby, originally the International Rugby Football Board, and from 1998 to 2014 the International Rugby Board, has been the governing body for rugby union since 1886. Rugby union spread from the home nations of Great Britain and Ireland, and was absorbed by many of the countries associated with the British Empire. Early exponents of the sport included Australia, New Zealand, South Africa and France. Countries that have adopted rugby union as the de facto national sport include Fiji, Georgia, Madagascar, New Zealand, Samoa, Tonga and Wales. Rugby union is played in over 100 countries across 6 continents. There are 101 full members and 18 associate members of World Rugby. The Rugby World Cup, first held in 1987, takes place every 4 years, with the winner of the tournament receiving the Webb Ellis Cup, the Six Nations Championship in Europe and the Rugby Championship in the Southern Hemisphere are major annual competitions. Major domestic competitions include the English Premiership in England, Top 14 in France, the Mitre 10 Cup in New Zealand and the Currie Cup in South Africa. Other transnational competitions include the Pro 12, involving Irish, Italian, Scottish and Welsh teams, the European Rugby Champions Cup, involving the top European teams from the respective domestic competitions, and Super Rugby, launched in 1996 with Australian, New Zealand and South African teams, and since 2016 also including teams in Argentina and Japan. History. The origin of rugby football is reputed to be an incident during a game of English school football at Rugby School in 1823, when William Webb Ellis is said to have picked up the ball and run with it. Although the evidence for the story is doubtful, it was immortalized at the school with a plaque unveiled in 1895. Despite the doubtful evidence, the Rugby World Cup trophy is named after Webb Ellis. Rugby football stems from the form of game played at Rugby School, which former pupils then introduced to the university. Old Rugby, and Albert Pell, a student at Cambridge, is credited with having formed the first football team. During this early period, different schools used different rules, with former pupils from Rugby and Eton attempting to carry the preferred rules through to the universities. A significant event in the early development of rugby football was the production of the first written laws of the game at Rugby School in 1845, which was followed by the Cambridge Rules drawn up in 1848. Other important events include the Blackheath Club's decision to leave the Football Association in 1863 and the formation of the Rugby Football Union in 1871. The code was originally known as rugby football. It was not until after the schism in England in 1895, which resulted in the separate code of rugby league, that the sport took on the name rugby union to differentiate it from the league game. Despite the sport's full name of rugby union, it is known simply as rugby throughout most of the world. First internationals. The first rugby football international was played on the 27th of March 1871 between Scotland and England. Scotland won the game 1-0. By 1881 both Ireland and Wales had representative teams, and in 1883 the first international competition, the Home Nations Championship, had begun. 1883 is also the year of the first Rugby Sevens tournament, the Melrose Sevens, which is still held annually. Two important overseas tours took place in 1888. A British Isles team visited Australia and New Zealand. Although a private venture, it laid the foundations for future British and Irish Lions tours, and the 1888–89 New Zealand native football team brought the first overseas team to British spectators. During the early history of rugby union, a time before commercial air travel, teams from different continents rarely met. The first two notable tours both took place in 1888, the British Isles team touring New Zealand and Australia, followed by the New Zealand team touring Europe. Traditionally, the most prestigious tours were the Southern Hemisphere countries of Australia, New Zealand and South Africa making a tour of a Northern Hemisphere, and the return tours made by a joint British and Irish team. Tours would last for months. Due to long travelling times and the number of games undertaken, the 1888 New Zealand team began the tour in Hawke's Bay in June and did not complete their schedule until August 1889, having played 107 rugby matches. Touring international sides would play test matches against international opponents, including national, club and county sides in the case of Northern Hemisphere rugby, or provincial, state sides in the case of Southern Hemisphere rugby. Between 1905 and 1908, all three major Southern Hemisphere rugby countries sent the first touring teams to the Northern Hemisphere. New Zealand in 1905, followed by South Africa in 1906 and Australia in 1908. All three teams brought new styles of play, fitness levels and tactics, and were far more successful than critics had expected. The New Zealand 1905 touring team performed a hack before each match, leading Welsh Rugby Union administrator Tom Williams to suggest that Wales player Teddy Morgan lead the crowd in singing the Welsh national anthem, Hen Wladf Wynadai, as a response. After Morgan began singing, the crowd joined in, the first time a national anthem was sung at the start of a sporting event. In 1905 France played England in its first international match. Rugby union was included as an event in the Olympic Games 4 times during the early 20th century. No international rugby games and union-sponsored club matches were played during the First World War, but competitions continued through service teams such as the New Zealand Army team. During the Second World War, no international matches were played by most countries, though Italy, Germany and Romania played a limited number of games, and Cambridge and Oxford continued their annual university match. The first officially sanctioned international Rugby Sevens tournament took place in 1973 at Murrayfield, one of Scotland's biggest stadiums, as part of the Scottish Rugby Union centenary celebrations. World Cup and professionalism. In 1987 the first Rugby World Cup was held in Australia and New Zealand, and the inaugural winners were New Zealand. The first World Cup Sevens tournament was held at Murrayfield in 1993. Rugby Sevens was introduced into the Commonwealth Games in 1998 and has been added to the Olympic Games of 2016. Rugby union was an amateur sport until the IRB declared the game open in 1995, removing restrictions on payments to players. However, the pre-1995 period of rugby union was marked by frequent accusations of amateurism, including an investigation in Britain by House of Commons Select Committee, Following the introduction of professionalism, transnational club competitions were started, with the Heineken Cup in the Northern Hemisphere and Super Rugby in the Southern Hemisphere. The Tri-Nations, an annual international tournament involving Australia, New Zealand and South Africa, kicked off in 1996. In 2012, this competition was extended to include Argentina, a country whose impressive performances in international games was deemed to merit inclusion in the competition. As a result of the expansion to 4 teams, the tournament was renamed the Rugby Championship. Teams and positions. Each team starts the match with 15 players on the field and 7 or 8 substitutes. Players in a team are divided into 8 forwards and 7 backs. Forwards. The main responsibilities of the forward players are to gain and retain possession of the ball. Players in these positions are generally bigger and stronger and take part in the scrum and line-out. The forwards are often collectively referred to as the pack, especially when in the scrum formation. Front row. The front row consists of 3 players, 2 props and the hooker. The role of the 2 props is to support the hooker during scrums, to provide support for the jumpers during lineouts and to provide strength and power in rucks and mauls. The third position in the front row is the hooker. The hooker is a key position in attacking and defensive play and is responsible for winning the ball in the scrum. Hookers normally throw the ball in at line-outs. Second row. The second row consists of 2 locks or lock forwards. Locks are usually the tallest players in the team, and specialize as line-out jumpers. The main role of the lock in line-outs is to make a standing jump, often supported by the other forwards, to either collect the thrown ball or ensure the ball comes down on the side. Locks also have an important role in the scrum, binding directly behind the 3 front row players and providing forward drive. Back row. The back row, not to be confused with backs, is the third and final row of the forward positions. They are often referred to as the loose forwards. The 3 positions in the back row are the 2 flankers and the number 8. The 2 flanker positions, called the blindside flanker and openside flanker, are the final row in the scrum. They are usually the most mobile forwards in the game. The main role is to win possession through turnovers. The number 8 packs down between the 2 locks at the back of the scrum. The role of the number 8 in the scrum is to control the ball after it has been heeled back from the front of the pack, and the position provides a link between the forwards and backs during attacking phases. Backs. The back's role is to create and convert point-scoring opportunities. They are generally smaller, faster and more agile than the forwards. Another distinction between the backs and the forwards is that the backs are expected to have superior kicking and ball-handling skills, especially the fly half, scrum half and full back. Halfbacks. The halfbacks consist of 2 positions, the scrum half and the fly half. The fly half is crucial to a team's game plan, orchestrating the team's performance. They are usually the first to receive the ball from the scrum half following a breakdown, line out, or scrum, and need to be decisive with what actions to take and be effective at communicating with the outside backs. Many fly halves are also their team's goal kickers. The scrum half is the link between the forwards and the backs. They receive the ball from the line-out and remove the ball from the back of the scrum, usually passing it to the fly half. They also feed the scrum and sometimes have to act as a 4th loose forward. 3/4. There are 4 3/4 positions: the inside centre, outside centre and left and right wings. The centres will attempt to tackle attacking players, whilst in attack they should employ speed and strength to breach opposition defences. The wings are generally positioned on the outside of the back line. The primary function is to finish off moves and score tries. Wings are usually the fastest players in the team and are elusive runners who use the speed to avoid tackles. Fullbacks. The fullback normally positions himself several meters behind the back line. He fields any opposition kicks and is often the last line of defense should an opponent break through the back line. Two of the most important attributes of a good fullback are dependable catching skills and a good kicking game. Laws. Scoring rugby union is played between two teams. The one that scores more points wins the game. Points can be scored in several ways. A try, scored by grounding the ball in the in-goal area, is worth 5 points and a subsequent conversion kick scores 2 points. A successful penalty kick or a drop goal each score 3 points. The values of each of these scoring methods have been changed over the years. Playing field. The field of play on a rugby pitch is as near as possible to a maximum of 144 meters long by 70 meters wide. In actual gameplay there should be a maximum of 100 meters between the two try lines, with anywhere between 10 and 22 meters behind each try line to serve as the in-goal area. Several lines cross the field, notably the halfway line and the 22, which is 22 meters from the goal line. Stricter rules apply to the pitch size for matches between national representative teams. The same maximums apply in this case, but the distance between the two try lines must also be at least 94 meters and the pitch must be at least 68 meters wide. Rugby goalposts are H-shaped and consist of two poles, 5.6 meters apart, connected by a horizontal crossbar 3 meters above the ground. Match structure. At the beginning of the game, the captains and the referee toss a coin to decide which team will kick off first. Play then starts with a drop kick, with the players chasing the ball into the opposition's territory, and the other side trying to retrieve the ball and advance it. If the ball does not reach the opponent's 10-meter line, the opposing team has two choices: to have the ball kicked off again, or to have a scrum at the center of the halfway line. If the player with the ball is tackled, frequently a ruck will result. Games are divided into 40-minute halves, with a break in the middle. The sides exchange ends of the field after the half-time break. Stoppages for injury are to allow the referee to take disciplinary action do not count as part of the playing time, so that the elapsed time is usually longer than 80 minutes. The referee is responsible for keeping time, even when, as in many professional tournaments, he is assisted by an official timekeeper. If time expires while the ball is in play, the game continues until the ball is dead, and only then will the referee blow the whistle to signal half-time or full-time. But if the referee awards a penalty or free kick, the game continues. In the knockout stages of rugby competitions, most notably the Rugby World Cup, 2 extra time periods of 10 minutes periods are played if the game is tied after full time. If scores are level after 100 minutes, then the rules call for 20 minutes of sudden death extra time to be played. If the sudden death extra time period results in no scoring, a kicking competition is used to determine the winner. However, no match in the history of the Rugby World Cup has ever gone past 100 minutes into a sudden death extra time period. Passing and kicking. Forward passing is not allowed. The ball can be passed laterally or backwards. The ball tends to be moved forward in 3 ways: by kicking, by a player running with it, or within a scrum or maul. Only the player with the ball may be tackled or rucked. When a ball is knocked forward by a player with his or her arms, a knock-on is committed, and play is restarted with a scrum. Any player may kick the ball forward in an attempt to gain territory. When a player anywhere in the playing area kicks indirectly into touch so that the ball first bounces in the field of play, the throw-in is taken where the ball went into touch. If the player kicks directly into touch from within one's own 22 22-meter line. The line out is taken by the opposition where the ball went into touch, but if the ball is kicked into touch directly by a player outside the 22-meter line, the line out is taken level to where the kick was taken. Breakdowns. The aim of the defending side is to stop the player with the ball, either by bringing them to ground, or by contesting for possession with the ball carrier on the feet. Such a circumstance is called a breakdown, and each is governed by a specific law. Tackling. A player may tackle an opposing player who has the ball by holding them while bringing them to ground. Tacklers cannot tackle above the shoulder, and the tackler has to attempt to wrap their arms around the player being tackled to complete the tackle. It is illegal to push, shoulder charge, or to trip a player using feet or legs, but hands may be used. Tacklers may not tackle an opponent who has jumped to catch a ball until the player has landed. Rucking mauls occur after a player with the ball has come into contact with an opponent, but the handler remains on his feet. Once any combination of at least 3 players have bound themselves, a maul has been set. A ruck is similar to the maul, but in this case the ball has gone to ground with at least 3 attacking players binding themselves on the ground in an attempt to secure the ball. Set pieces. Line out. When the ball leaves the side of the field, a line out is awarded against the team which last touched the ball. Forward. Players from each team line up a meter apart, perpendicular to the touch line and between 5 meters and 15 meters from the touch line. The ball is thrown from the touch line down the center of the lines of forwards by a player from the team that did not play the ball into touch. The exception to this is when the ball went out from a penalty, in which case the side who gained the penalty throws the ball in. Both sides compete for the ball and players may lift their teammates. A jumping player cannot be tackled until they stand, and only shoulder-to-shoulder contact is allowed. Deliberate infringement of this law is dangerous play, and results in a penalty kick. Scrum. A scrum is a way of restarting the game safely and fairly after a minor infringement. It is awarded when the ball has been knocked or passed forward, if a player takes the ball over his own try line and puts the ball down, when a player is accidentally offside, or when the ball is trapped in a ruck or maul with no realistic chance of being retrieved. A team may also opt for a scrum if awarded a penalty. A scrum is formed by the 8 forwards from each team binding together in 3 rows. The front row consists of the 2 props either side of the hooker. The second row consists of 2 locks and the 2 flankers. Behind the second row is the number 8. This formation is known as the 3-4-1 formation. Once a scrum is formed, the scrum half from the team awarded the feed rolls the ball into the gap between the 2 front rows known as the tunnel. The 2 hookers then compete for possession by hooking the ball backwards with the feet, while each pack tries to push the opposing pack backwards to help gain possession. The side that wins possession transfers the ball to the back of the scrum, where it is picked up either by the number 8 or by the scrum half. Officials and offenses. There are 3 match officials, a referee, and 2 assistant referees. The latter, formerly known as touch judges, had the primary function of indicating when the ball had gone into touch. The role has been expanded, and they are now expected to assist the referee in a number of areas, such as watching for foul play and checking offside lines. In addition, for matches in high-level competitions, there is often a television match official to assist with certain decisions, linked up to the referee by radio. The referees have a system of hand signals to indicate the decisions. Common offenses include tackling above the shoulders, collapsing a scrum, ruck maul, not releasing the ball when on the ground, or being offside. The non-offending team has a number of options when awarded a penalty. A tap kick, when the ball is kicked a very short distance from hand, allowing the kicker to regather the ball and run with it. A punt, when the ball is kicked a long distance from hand. For field position, a place kick, when the kicker will attempt to score a goal, or a scrum. Players may be sent off or temporarily suspended for 10 minutes for foul play or repeated infringements, and may not be replaced. Occasionally, infringements are not caught by the referee during the match, and these may be cited by the citing commissioner after the match and have punishments imposed on the infringing player. Replacements and substitutions during the match. Players may be replaced as substituted. A player who has been replaced may not rejoin play unless he was temporarily replaced to have bleeding controlled. A player who has been substituted may return temporarily to replace a player who has a blood injury or has suffered a concussion, or permanently if he is replacing a front row forward. In international matches, 8 replacements are allowed in domestic or cross-border tournaments. At the discretion of the responsible national union, the number of replacements may be nominated to a maximum of 8, of whom 3 must be sufficiently trained and experienced to provide cover for the 3 front row positions. Prior to 2016, all substitutions, no matter the goals, counted against the limit during a match. In 2016, World Rugby changed the law so that substitutions made to replace a player deemed unable to continue due to foul play by the opposition would no longer count against the match limit. This change was introduced in January of that year in the Southern Hemisphere and June in the Northern Hemisphere. Equipment. The most basic items of equipment for a game of rugby union of the ball itself: a rugby shirt, rugby shorts, socks and boots. The rugby ball is oval in shape, and is made up of 4 panels. The ball was historically made of leather, but in the modern era most games use a ball made from a synthetic material. The WR lays out specific dimensions for the ball: 280 to 300 mm in length, 740 to 770 mm in circumference of length, and 580 to 620 mm in circumference of width. Rugby boots have soles with studs to allow grip on the turf of the pitch. The studs may be either metal or plastic, but must not have any sharp edges or ridges. Protective equipment is optional and strictly regulated. The most common items are mouthguards, which are worn by almost all players, and are compulsory in some rugby-playing nations. Other protective items that are permitted include headgear, thin, non-rigid shoulder pads and shin guards, which are worn underneath socks. Bandages or tape can be worn to support or protect injuries. Some players wear tape around the head to protect the ears in scrums and rucks. Female players may also wear chest pads. Although not worn for protection, some types of fingerless mitts are allowed to aid grip. It is the responsibility of the match officials to check players' clothing and equipment before a game to ensure that it conforms to the laws of the game.